This is a podcast to show you how to use your TI to find the roots, or what we also call the zeros or the solutions to a quadratic equation. We'll also talk about how to find the vertex, which is a maximum or a minimum. And finally, I'll show you a quick thing about how to zoom. Okay? So first, the roots. I've already entered these two, or I should say one quadratic equation. I've entered it in two forms. I've entered it first in that general or standard form, x squared minus 5x minus 6, and I also entered it in factored form, x minus 6 and x plus 1. So you can see the graph already over here, right? And you can see the table and the equations. On your calculator, you only get to see one view at once. Okay? So you should pause this for a moment and enter the equations if you haven't already. You can just enter one if you like, okay? But I like you to see both and see that they're the same. Then, once you've got those equations in, let's hit graph, okay? And try to see where these roots are. Hopefully you know from the equations where they should be, okay, from the factored form. But let's see how to use our calculator to find that. We want to use the calculate command, which is up above the trace button. So it's the blue command, so we have to hit second first. So second, and then the trace button, so that's the calculate menu. We want that second option. We want to find zeros. Okay? Again, those are kind of all the same word, roots or zeros, or sometimes we just say solutions because we assume that the equation's equal to 0. So let's hit 2 to find zeros. Now you're going to need to tell it three things: a left bound, a right bound, and a guess. Okay? So left bound is the first question, and you'll see that this cursor, right, is, well, I'm not sure where it starts always, but it's pretty close to our first root on the left there. I'm going to go a little further left to make sure that my left bound is to the left of that root. I'll hit enter. The next question will be the right bound. I'll have to scroll to the right, right, and hit enter. And that guess, it just wants you to put the cursor close to the root to make it faster for the calculator to find that. Okay? If we hit enter, it does it really, really quickly. Right? And it tells you that that 0 is at -1, 0, which is exactly what we expected based on the factored form, right? Because if we put in -1 here for x, this whole thing equals 0. You can do the same thing over at 6, though I won't show it to you here, just for the sake of time. Okay? Let's move on to find the minimum or the maximum. Okay? In this case, it's a minimum, the vertex, down here. I mean, we can look at it, looks like it's maybe, what, 1, 2, looks like it's approximately 3. Right? You should, though, be able to know exactly where it is on the x-axis based on where these roots are. Okay? So once you've found that second root, okay, you should know what's halfway in between. Okay? You can pause the video for a moment and try to calculate that. Okay, if you're back, let's go back to the calculate menu. Right? And this time we don't want the 0, we don't want that second option, we want the third option, minimum. Okay? If the parabola opened it downward, we'd want a maximum. So let's choose 3, and it's going to ask you the same 3 questions for a left bound, a right bound, and a guess. Okay? So this left bound, we can leave it right there if we want, but it's actually a little bit faster if we move that cursor closer to the minimum. That's probably close enough. So you see that little arrow appears there for the left bound. And if we go right until that cursor is to the right of the minimum, it'll be one more. Okay, and you see that other arrow appear. So it's looking for a minimum in this range. Okay, let's put our guess a little bit closer to where the vertex appears to be and hit enter. And your calculator tells you it's at 2.50000009 and -12.25. Now you have to be a little bit smarter than your calculator and know that this is actually just 2.5 exactly. Okay? And these extra decimal places are just kind of an artifact of your calculator, unfortunately. So the final thing in here is zooming, okay, which you do with the zoom button. there are a few different options. What you probably want is just number 2, zoom in or zoom out. Okay? You can also use Z box to draw a box, and then that will be your window. I'm going to use zoom out just so you can see what happens. So the amount that it zooms out is, you don't set it. You just set the point where it zooms out about and hit enter. I think the view from before was better, and I think rather than zooming, you're probably better off going to the window and thinking about where your roots are based on your factored form and going from there, maybe looking at the table. But if you like, you've got these automatic zoom options, and it's worth playing around with them. So, hope that was helpful.